You are watching the Neuro-Affirming Conversation Hour for outreach and support. The Humanities 101 Foundation welcomes you.
Welcome back, Nacho Nuts. Wherever you're joining us, whether it be morning, afternoon, or evening, we welcome you. It's the newest episode here, and before we get started, I want to open with a little moment that still feels a little unreal to me, but in the best way possible. A few nights ago, my daughter and I were coming home from school, and we were doing that usual shuffle of how was your day and did everything go okay and other half-finished sentences. And the topic turned to current events and what was going on in her school. And it made a very particular turn in a weird way to a topic that was particularly familiar to me, although I am not a middle school girl. It was Hamlet. And let me say this plainly. My daughter's in middle school. And here we were, my daughter and her nerd father who could not help himself. So as she told me about the drama of the day, the pressure and the way that everything feels amplified in public and impossible to shut off, I kept hearing the echo of that Danish teenager that Shakespeare gave us. We were talking about grief and identity and the way that the mind can spiral when the world starts to feel unreal. And I found myself thinking, this is Hamlet, right here in the cab of my truck. And then, as we were comparing the two stories of what she was going through, her collective generation, and Hamlet, she turned to me and said, it's like you cannot turn it off. And my whole chest tightened a little bit because she wasn't just following the plot. She was naming the feelings within the story. And I was watching her connect her own world to Hamlet's. Then she told me what had been swirling through her school all week. This was the newest discussion sweeping the halls, and it was kind of a war on teenage depression. Not in a tidy, inspirational poster way either, more like a constant ambient pressure. Who is struggling? Who is masking? Who is burning out? Who is using too much social media? Who is fine until they're not? Is it the jokes? Is it the group chats? Is it the way kids talk about sleep, food, attention, and the heaviness that they carry like it's normal? And right there, in the middle of a conversation about the Danish prince, it hit me. Our kids are doing this big, ancient human work, trying to name what hurts, trying to make sense of it, trying to figure out what is real and what is performative, what is real and what is just survival. And this is where the modern world comes crashing in, because at the exact same time that my daughter is trying to make meaning out of Shakespeare and the world, the grown-up world is in the courts and in headlines arguing about systems that shape teen attention, teen identity, and teen despair. There are major cases moving forward that accuse platforms of designing features that hook young users, then denying or minimizing the harms. And when I say platforms, I mean the ones we all know and that many families live with every day. TikTok, all of the various meta platforms, basically its own ecosystem. YouTube. But meanwhile, across the world, Australia and other countries have put age restrictions. In the state of Michigan, they're talking about banning cell phones in schools altogether. In Australia, they put restrictions into effect that require platforms to take reasonable steps to prevent under 16-year-olds from creating or keeping social media accounts, and this went into effect on December 10th of last year. So here's the question that I can't stop thinking about. What does it mean that a middle schooler can see the inside of Hamlet's mind and also see the inside of her own school culture, while the adult world is still debating whether the digital environment around her should be treated like a product, a playground, or a public health crisis? And I want to be careful here. This is not an episode where we pretend that there's one simple villain and one simple fix. We never do. If you've ever raised a teenager, taught teenagers, been a teenager, or survived your own teenage years, you already know life does not work that way. But I do think we can tell the truth. We can talk about what is happening. We can talk about design, attention, and social comparison. We can talk about why it's so hard for teens to get quiet inside their own heads. We can talk about how schools are trying to respond, sometimes wisely, sometimes clumsily, sometimes heroically under impossible conditions. And most importantly, we can talk about what helps. Because if my daughter can sit at a kitchen counter or in a truck cab and wrestle with a 400-year-old story about grief and confusion, then I believe that we can do something brave too. We can build better rituals. We can practice steadier boundaries. We can make space for real connection. We can teach our kids and remind ourselves that despair is loud, but it is not truth. So in today's episode, we're going to start with what the Hamlet moment. And then we're going to widen the lens, not into headlines or courtrooms, but into lived experience underneath all of it. The worry, the overwhelm, the loneliness, and the quiet ways people are trying to stay afloat. We're going to talk about advice that actually helps, the human truths that keep showing up across generations, and the ways we cope and can learn to cope better. Because we do need to learn to cope better when times are tough. But before we do, I want to pause on something my daughter said that honestly stopped me cold. She was disturbed by how quickly adults can rally around an abstract target like social media, as if naming the villain is the same thing as solving the problem. She said in her middle school way something like, why do they go after apps and policies like this when they're actual kids who are not safe? Kids she can name. She had been hearing about age verification pushes on platforms like Roblox, and she was wrestling with the fear that we will build systems that feel protective on paper or in zeros and ones while missing the urgent real-world work of finding kids who've gone missing and protecting the ones who are vulnerable right now. And that's the hinge point for this episode, because we humans have a pattern. We like to fight ideas. We like neat categories. We like clean villains. We like the satisfying feeling of doing something, even when that something does not touch the actual wound. So yes, we are going to talk about lawsuits, bans, and digital architecture shaping teen life, but in an abstract way, because that way we can get to the real question, the harder question, a more human question. When we try to protect kids, are we reaching for symbolic fixes, or are we doing the slower, messier work that actually makes children safer? Not panic, not performative outrage, not kids these days or think about the children. Just a calm, steady kind of honesty. How do we protect developing minds, honor teen dignity, and stay anchored into the real world safety, not just headlines and abstractions? So let's take a breath. Let's drop our shoulders, unclench your jaw. And I'd like to begin by continuing this discussion of Hamlet in a different way. Because if you want a snapshot of how humans cope when times are uncertain, you can do a lot worse than the moment where Polonius, Shakespeare's official windbag and accidental comedian, corners his son and tries to hand him a whole life philosophy in one breath. Polonius is not the wise mentor always. He's the Shakespearean fool in a suit, but here's something different, because he's tossing out tidy maxims that sound profound, partly because he cannot tolerate the messiness of real life. But there's always something deeper with the fool in Shakespeare. So here's his famous advice to his son Laertes, before going off to college, no less. Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Those friends thou hast, in their adoption tried, grapple them to thy soul with hoops of steel, but do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new hatched unfledged comrade. Beware of entrance to a quarrel, but being in, bear it that the opposed may beware of thee. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. Costly thy habit as thy purse can buy, but not expressed in fancy rich, not gaudy. For the apparel oft proclaims the man, neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan oft loses both itself and friend, and borrowing dulls the edge of husbandry. This above all, to thine own self be true. Probably one of the most famously quoted Shakespeare lines. To thine own self be true. Now, on the surface, it sounds like a greatest hits playlist of good sense. Think before you speak. Do not let impulsive thoughts run your life. Be friendly without being performative. Choose your people carefully and hold the real ones close. Avoid drama when you can, but if you're in it, do not be naive. Listen more than you talk. Accept feedback without surrendering your identity. Dress in a way that reflects self-respect rather than insecurity. Do not tangle your life in money you cannot repay. And then the grand finale, be true to yourself. But the reason Polonius works so well in this scene is that Shakespeare is showing us something painfully human. Polonius is not offering Laertes a relationship. He's offering him a script. He's handing him a list of rules as if rules can protect you from uncertainty, embarrassment, heartbreak, or grief. He's trying to tame the chaos of becoming an adult with tidy lines that fit on a page. And that's exactly where I want to start today. Not because Polonius is right about everything, although he is right about a lot in that particular instance, but because this is what we do when we are scared. We reach for rules. We reach for slogans. We reach for certainty. We try to compress a whole complicated life into a few clean sentences because clean sentences feel safer than complicated feelings. And look, I'm not here to mock the instinct. I run there too. When life is loud, when the world feels unstable, when you feel like you're one more email away from snapping, rules can feel like a railing on a dark stairwell. They give your mind something to hold on to. But here's the tension. Rules can also become a kind of armor that keep you from actually feeling what you need to feel. Asking what you need to ask for, or admitting what is true to others and yourself. A rule can keep you safe, but it can also keep you stuck. So I want to walk through Polonius's advice the way we should walk through most advice in hard seasons, with a highlighter in one hand and gentle skepticism in the other. Not, is this quote iconic, but is this usable? Not, is it clever, but is it kind? Not, does this make me feel comfortable, but rather, does this make things more real? Because some of what Polonius says is solid, if we translate it honestly into modern life. Think about it. Give thy thoughts no tongue. In 2026 terms, you do not have to publish every feeling. You don't have to turn every irritation into an argument. You're allowed to pause. You're allowed to cool down. You're allowed to let a thought pass through without building a home in your mouth. Think about this one. Grapple them to thy soul with hoops of steel. That one's surprisingly tender. Hold on to the people who have earned your trust. In hard times, your nervous system needs familiar, safe people more than it needs novelty. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Listen generously, but do not give away your whole self to every room you enter. You can be open without being porous. And then there is the line that people quote as if it is always empowering. To thine own self be true. And that can be liberating, yes. But it can also be a trap if we misunderstand it. Because the real question is, which self? The scared self who wants to retreat? The masked self who performs competence? The angry self who wants to burn bridges? The exhausted self who just wants to disappear? Or the people-pleasing self who says yes when the body is screaming no? Or what about the deeper self? The values self, the self that wants to live with integrity even when it's hard. That's where we're headed today. Not towards more rules, not towards a perfect life script, but toward a few steady human truths that actually hold up when times are tough. Truths that make room for grief and confusion and still leave space for dignity, repair, and joy. So let's take Polonius's list, set it gently on the table, and ask, what part of this is wisdom? What part is fear? And what would it look like to choose something truer than a slogan when life gets heavy? And here's where I want to turn the microphone toward you, Nacho Knots. This is that weekly participation section. What is a piece of advice you've received that took you years to truly understand? Not the kind you nodded at politely, not the kind you posted on a sticky note. I mean the kind that sounded simple, even obvious, and yet it didn't become real wisdom until life made you pay tuition for it, until you made the same mistake, until you learned it in your body, not just your brain. I ask because I keep thinking about a man who did that for me. When I was 16, 17, 18, I worked for an older gentleman who ran a kitchen at a 4-H camp. He was a World War II vet. He was one of those old school cooks who could make a quiet room feel like an education. He wasn't flashy. He didn't do speeches, although he did do stories. He just showed up, did his work, and watched everything. And for almost a decade, from the time I was 15 until my mid-20s, he taught me things in the way people like to learn. That's sideways. Not as a lecture, but as a sentence tossed over his shoulder while stirring a pot, cleaning the reefers, or checking the timer like it was a sacred ritual. He would say things that sounded like Polonius-type advice. Short, clean, almost too simple. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Do it right the first time or you will do it twice. Do not run your mouth when you're angry. Go wash your hands and come back. Take care of your feet. They'll carry you longer than your pride will. And I heard him. Always listened. I really did. I respected him. I even repeated some of those lines like they were mine for years. But if I'm honest, I didn't truly understand him. Not then. Because when you're young, you can recognize wisdom without having lived enough to feel its weight. You can memorize the sentence without paying the cost it is trying to save you from. He passed away in my mid-20s, and I remember feeling like a library had burned down. like a whole way of being in the world had quietly exited. And then life did what life often does. I rushed when I should have slowed. I cut corners when I thought I could get away with it. I said the thing in the moment that felt satisfying that later cost me a relationship or part of my reputation. I ignored my body. I acted like rest was weakness. I thought urgency was the same as importance. And only after I had made those mistakes, only after I had paid the price, did his words come back with their full meaning. Not as quotes, but as reality. That's the strange mercy of good advice. Sometimes it's a seed, and it takes a few seasons, a few storms, before it finally becomes a tree. So I want to ask you again, and I want you to really sit with it. What is the advice you heard years ago, maybe from a parent, a mentor, a coach, a boss, a friend, that you did not truly understand until you made the same mistake yourself? And that's where I also want to land for a moment, because it points to something I wish we said out loud more often. Mistakes are only mistakes if they stay the same shape in your life. If you repeat them without reflection, if you keep bleeding in the same place and call it fate, but if you learn from them, they stop being a life sentence and they become a lesson. They become information. They become wisdom you earned the hard way, but wisdom all the same. Here's what I mean. A mistake becomes a lesson the moment you stop asking, what is wrong with me? And start asking, what is this trying to teach me? That shift is not a magic trick. It doesn't erase consequences. It doesn't undo harm, but it changes your posture. It turns shame into curiosity, and curiosity is where growth actually happens. Because shame, shame says you're the problem. A lesson says you hit a limit. Shame says hide this. A lesson says look at it closely. And most of us, especially in hard seasons, do not need more punishment. We need clearer patterns. Sometimes the lesson is simple. When I'm exhausted, I get sharp. Or when I feel ignored, I get louder. Or when I'm scared, I try to control everything. The mistake is not proof you're bad. It's data about what your nervous system does under pressure. Sometimes the lesson is deeper. I confuse intensity with love. I confuse productivity with worth. I confuse being needed with being safe. And those are not personality flaws. They're survival strategies. And some of them were built in early childhood. Some of them were built in trauma. Some of them were built in workplaces, in schools that reward performance and punish honesty. And then there's the kind of mistake that is really just a misread of time. You treated a temporary season like a permanent one. You made a desperate decision because you couldn't imagine things improving. You forgot that your body changes, the weather changes, the mind changes, the seasons change. The lesson there is not I am weak. The lesson is I needed steadier support. So what turns a mistake into a lesson? Not self-hate, not vows, not big speeches, not "I will never do this again" typed in all caps or written 100 times. What turns a mistake into a lesson is a small, clear, repeatable process. First, you name what happened without drama, just the truth. Second, you name what it cost you: time, trust, money, health, peace. Third, you find the trigger, the moment before the moment. What set this all in motion? And fourth, you choose one change for next time, one boundary, one pause, one phrase, one plan. Fifth, you practice repair with others if needed, but always with yourself. Repair is crucial because some mistakes become chronic only because we cannot tolerate the discomfort of owning them. We'd rather defend ourselves than learn. We would rather blame the world than adjust our approach. But when you can say, "I did that, it mattered, and I'm changing my next step," you reclaim your agency. You become the author of your own story again. And I want to say something clearly because somebody listening needs it. Learning from a mistake does not mean you have to be grateful for what hurt you. It means you refuse to waste it. It means you refuse to let pain be the only outcome. It means you extract the lesson and then you set the weight down. So today, we're going to talk about how to do that in real life, not in theory. How to spot patterns, how to slow down for 5 seconds when you're about to say the thing you will regret, how to build routines that make it harder to spiral, how to create the kind of support that turns "I am failing" into "I am learning." Because in the end, a mistake is not a verdict. It's a fork in the road. And learning is how you choose the better path next time. Learning from mistakes is one of the few truly universal human skills. It's older than any app, any trend, any self-help framework. It's the quiet engine behind becoming a better person. Not the person who never messes up, but the person who grows. And the humanities have been telling us this for a long time. In Greek tragedy, the problem is rarely evil. The problem is a human blind spot. Pride, haste, denial, the refusal to see what is true. The characters do not fall because they are monsters. They fall because they keep walking the same path, even when the evidence is screaming, "Turn around, do not go there." The tragedy is not the mistake. The tragedy is the refusal to learn. That is why mistakes matter. They reveal where we are still asleep. In philosophy, there's a very old idea that the examined life is a life worth living. Not because reflection makes you superior, but because reflection makes you honest. Without reflection, your life becomes a set of reflexes. You become a bundle of habits you did not choose. You react, you repeat, you defend, you blame, but you do not grow. But with reflection, something changes. A mistake becomes a mirror. Not a mirror to punish you, but a mirror that tells you where your values and your behaviors do not match yet. And that's at the heart of becoming a better person. Not perfection, but alignment. If you value kindness, but you snap when you're stressed, your mistake is a signal. Your kindness needs a support system. You may need a rest. You may need a boundary. You may need a different script when you feel cornered. If you value honesty, but you avoid hard conversations, your mistake is a signal. Your honesty needs courage and a plan. You may need to practice repair language. You may need to tolerate temporary discomfort for long-term integrity. If you value community, but you isolate when you're struggling, your mistake is a signal. Your community needs rehearsal. You may need to decide in advance who you contact when the spiral starts, like a safe friend. Mistakes show you where your ideals are real and where they're still aspirational. And this is where a lot of people get stuck. They treat mistakes like identity. They say, I am a failure, instead of I failed at something. And that's not just harsh. It's inaccurate. You are not your worst moment. You are not your most reactive day. You are not the version of you that showed up under sleep deprivation, grief, fear, or overload. A better question is, what kind of person do I want to be, and what practices will help me become that better person more consistently? Because being better is not mostly a dramatic decision. It's a daily practice. It's training. The ancient writers understood this. Aristotle talked about virtues as habits built by repeated actions. In plain terms, you do not become courageous by reading about courage. You become courageous by doing the next brave thing when you're scared again and again until it becomes part of you. You do not become patient by wishing. You become patient by practicing patience in small, ordinary moments, especially when you don't feel like it. And this matters because learning from mistakes is how you build those habits. It's how you turn a painful moment into a better pattern. And here is what learning looks like in human terms. It looks like humility, which is not self-hatred. Humility is not self-hatred. It is simply the willingness to say, I was wrong. It looks like accountability, which is not shame. It's the willingness to take responsibility for impact, not just intention. It looks like repair, which is not groveling. It's the willingness to rebuild trust through actions that match words. It looks like discernment, which is not cynicism. Discernment is the willingness to notice what is actually happening, not what we wish is happening. And it looks like compassion, which is not making excuses. It is treating yourself and others as humans in progress. The best people I've known are not the ones who never mess up. They're the ones who can learn. They can apologize without collapsing. They can change without announcing it. They can hear feedback without turning it into a referendum of their worth. They can take a hard lesson and let it make them softer, not smaller. And I want to name one more thing because it's important. Learning from mistakes is also how we protect our hope. And let me say that again. Learning from mistakes is also how we protect our hope. When you believe you can learn, you do not have to be trapped by your past. You do not have to pretend you have always been wise. You do not have to maintain a perfect image. You can be a person who is becoming. So if you're listening and you've made a mistake and you have a mistake on your mind right now, here's the gentlest truth I can offer. Don't waste it. Name it. learn from it, repair what you can, adjust your next step. Then let it become part of your education, not part of your identity. And in a world that often feels like it's spinning too fast, that is one of the most powerful human things you can do. You can choose to grow. And all of that brings us to the wider weather we're living under right now, both literally and figuratively. Because in times like these, when the headlines feel relentless and the ground feels unsteady, it's easy to start thinking in a strange and heavy way. It can feel like you were dropped into the wrong chapter of history, like being alive right now is some kind of cosmic mistake or theological joke. Like everyone else got an easier era and you got this one. You might not say it out loud, but you feel it in your body. The fatigue, the vigilance, the tightness in your chest when you open your phone, the sense you're always catching up on bad news rather than just news. And if you felt like that, I want you to hear me clearly. That feeling is understandable. It's human. When the world is loud, your nervous system tries to make meaning of it. And one of the meanings it reaches for is often this. This should not be happening. Or, I should not be here for this. But this is where I want to offer you something steadier than despair. There's a line from Gandalf that I come back to again and again and again, especially in hard seasons. Just this past weekend, in fact. Frodo is overwhelmed by everything that has landed on his shoulders, and he tells Gandalf, I wish it need not have happened in my time. And Gandalf answers, so do I. And so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. That's the hinge. We do not get to choose the era. We do not get to choose every circumstance. We don't get to control the whole storm. But we do get a choice. Not a grand cinematic choice every day, but a real one. The choice of what we do with the time we have. And that choice matters because it brings you back to agency. It means that even in troubled times, you can choose what kind of person you will be. You can choose what you will feed your mind. You can choose what you will practice. You can choose what you will build. You can choose who you will be kind to. You can choose where you will draw boundaries. You can choose to repair. You can choose to rest. You can choose to stay connected. You can choose to be a small light in a dark room without pretending the darkness is not real. So if you've been carrying that quiet thought, I shouldn't be living in this time, I want to reframe it with you. This is not a mistake you're trapped inside. This is a time you are living through, and you still have a choice, not over everything, but over something, over your next step, over your next word, over the way you treat your own mind and body, over the way you show up for another human being, maybe. And in the days ahead, that is what we're going to practice together. Not control, not perfection, but faithful choices in the time we have. And I want to linger there a little longer because hope is not a mood. It's not a personality trait. It's not a vibe. It's a practice. Hope is what happens when you refuse to let the hardest thing be the only thing. It is what happens when you look at the size of the trouble and still choose one honest, constructive act. One phone call, one boundary, one apology, one glass of water, one walk around the block, one quiet reset. Hope is what happens when you stop demanding that you feel confident before you act, and you simply act with care while you feel what you feel. In tough times, your life does not need to become a heroic saga to matter. Most of the good that keeps the world from collapsing is small and unglamorous. It's the people showing up when they're tired. It's people keeping promises when no one is watching. It's people choosing repair over pride. It's people being gentle when they could be cruel. It's people telling the truth without turning it into a weapon. And it's people staying human. And you, Nacho Knots, you can be one of those people. You don't have to carry the whole world. You're never meant to carry the whole world. You only have to carry your small part of yourself with integrity. You only have to take the next right step, and then the next one the day after that. Some days, your right step will be outward, doing something, building something, speaking up, helping, creating. Other days, the next right step will be inward, resting, eating, asking for support, logging off, letting your nervous system settle. Both are courage. Both are care. Both are how we endure. And let me say this in a way that I hope lands gently. If you're alive in these times, you're not here by accident. You are here with your specific set of gifts, your specific tenderness, your specific stubborn ability to keep going. You've survived every hard day you already have lived. And that's not nothing. That's evidence. So when the world feels like too much, widen your frame, step back, take a different look. Look for what is still true. There's still people who love you. There are still places your body can soften. There are still songs that can steady you. There are still books that can name what you feel. And there are still friends who will answer, even if it has been a while. There's still laughter. There's still beauty. There's still the possibility of becoming. And you still have a choice in the time you have. You can choose not to become numb. You can choose not to become cruel. You can choose not to become a machine. You can choose to stay tender and steady even when the world rewards the opposite. So here's what I want you to do with me right now. Take a breath. Unclench your jaw. Drop your shoulders. Shake it out. Put your hand on your chest if that helps. And tell yourself quietly, without drama, I am here. I am learning. And I can take the next step. It's not a slogan. It's a vow. And we're going to keep that vow together. So before we close, I want to gather the threads we've been holding today and lay them down in a way you can carry with you. Think of what comes next as a set of gentle mile markers, a short recap of where we've been, what we've named, and what I hope you remember when you step back into your week. We began in that daddy-daughter conversation, the small miracle of a middle school meeting with Hamlet and real curiosity, not as an assignment, but as a mirror of conversations happening in the hallway. We named how young people are already wrestling with grief, confusion, pressure, and identity, often with more honesty than adults expect. That moment reminds us that the feelings we carry in hard seasons are not new. They're human, and they've been with us for generations. From there, we use Polonius's advice to Laertes as a doorway into how people reach for certainty when life feels unstable. We talked about why tidy rules and quotable lines can feel comforting and why they can also become a substitute for real wisdom. We practice holding advice with both respect and discernment, asking not, is this famous, but is this usable? And is this kind? And does this help me become more grounded, not more rigid? And then we turn the question for you. What advice did you receive that took you years to truly understand? We sat with that truth that some wisdom can be downloaded, but it has to be lived. And I told about Owen, the World War II vet cook, whose quiet phrases did not fully land until the same mistakes happened in my own hands. And that became a reminder that time is a teacher and that good mentors often plant seeds that bloom later. From that story, we built into the core truth of the episode. Mistakes are only mistakes if they remain unexamined. If you learn from them, they become lessons. We named the difference between shame and growth. We talked about how reflection turns a painful moment into information that we can use. We laid out the idea that learning is not grand speeches, it's noticing patterns, naming triggers, making one concrete change, and then practicing repair. We widen the lens into the humanities to remind ourselves that becoming better is not about perfection. It's about alignment. We touched on the long tradition of examining the self and the idea that character is built through practice. We named humility, accountability, repair, discernment, and compassion as the real tools of moral growth, not dramatic self-punishment, but steady, repeatable choices that make you more trustworthy to others and more gentle with yourself. Then we brought it into the reality of our present moment, the trouble of our times. We named how it can feel like that living right now feels like a mistake, like you were placed in the wrong era. And that feeling can settle in the nervous system as fatigue, dread, fear. And we offered a steady reframe through Gandalf's words, always Gandalf's words. We don't get to choose the times, but we do get to choose what we do with the time we have. We emphasized agency, not control over the whole storm, but ownership over the next step. We closed with hope as a practice rather than a mood. We reminded ourselves that the most of what keeps the world from collapsing is small and unglamorous. Rest, repair, kindness, boundaries, honesty, connection, the refusal to become numb or cruel. We grounded the episode in a simple, repeatable truth you can carry into next week. You are here, you are learning, and you choose the next step. Before we move into affirmations, a quick practical note. Remember, if this episode gave you something steady to hold on to, please follow, like, and share so that you can reach someone else who needs this next week. If you're able to support the work, you can donate through the links at humanities101.org. Because remember, April is Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, and I'll be speaking at the Autism Society of Wisconsin Conference in April, as well as the Autism Summit in Flint on April 25th. So I would like, if you want to give for that work, or even reach out to have me come speak at your facility, organization, or to facilitate a training during April, email me at info@humanities101.org. And as always, follow for more conversations like this. One more announcement before we move into our affirmations, Nacho Knots. I've accepted a Fulbright Specialist Program grant to travel to Central Asia in the fall of 2026. I'm going to deliver a series of lectures on American culture and society at a group of universities as part of the 250th celebration of our country. It's not just a personal milestone and one of my professional goals, but it directly serves our community and our college by strengthening international partnerships, elevating the college's public profile, and bringing back cross-cultural insights and materials that can enrich our collective lives. It also strengthens the foundation of disability advocacy here in Michigan. Building bridges across cultures is part of building stronger systems at home. It helps us bring back new perspectives on universal design, inclusion, and human dignity. And it reinforces the idea that disability justice and neuro-affirming practice belong in every conversation about education, public life, diplomacy, and community care. And finally, it continues the mission of the Humanities 101 Foundation. It expands the reach of our work, deepens the credibility of our advocacy, and creates new opportunities to connect local impact with a global story of belonging, access, and human values. I can't wait to share what I learn along the way. So check out all of the social medias because I'm taking you to Central Asia with me. It's all right, Nacho Nuts. Let's kind of come in close now. If this week stirred anything in you, grief, fatigue, regret, anger, or that quiet thought of, I wish I lived in an easier time, I want to offer you a few affirmations that match what we learned together. I'm going to say each one and then give it a sentence of meaning. So it's not just a line. It's something you can actually hold. Take what you need and leave the rest. I always say that. Come back to these affirmations as often as you want. So what are the affirmations for this week? I'm allowed to be human in hard times. You do not have to perform strength to deserve kindness, including your own. I do not have to be perfect to be worthy of care. Your worth is not a prize you earn after you get everything right. I can learn from what went wrong without becoming what went wrong. A mistake is something you did, not a definition of who you are. Mistakes are not a verdict. They are information. If you're willing to look honestly, a misstep can become a map. If I learn, I grow. If I grow, I am not stuck. Growth is proof that the story can change even if it changes slowly. I can choose one small, steady step today. You do not have to solve your whole life. You only have to take the next right step. I can pause before I speak. A pause is not weakness. It is wisdom, and it protects what matters. I can repair when I miss the mark. Repair is a skill, not a humiliation. It's how trust is rebuilt. I can be accountable without shaming myself. Accountability says, I will do better, and shame says, I am beyond hope. Choose the first one. I can tell the truth and still be kind. Honesty does not need cruelty to be real, and it can be steady and respectful. I do not get to choose the era, but I do get to choose my next action. You cannot control the whole storm, but you can steer your own small boat. I can decide what I will do with the time I have. Even a difficult season can hold meaning when you choose your values on purpose. I can be a small light without denying the darkness. Hope is not pretending. Hope is staying human and refusing to give up on care. I can stay tender without becoming fragile. Tenderness is strength when it is paired with boundaries. I can stay steady without becoming numb. You can protect your heart without shutting it down. I am not alone even when it feels lonely. But loneliness lies. Connection is often one brave message away. I can reach out to one safe person. You don't need a crowd. You need one steady hand to hold. I can ask for help before I hit empty. Needing support is not failure. It's self-respect. I can rest without earning it. Rest is not a reward. It's part of being alive. I can take care of my body and act as an act of dignity. Water, food, medicine, movement, fresh air, they're not chores. They're care. And if you only have energy for a short one this week, let it be this. I am here. That matters more than you think. I am learning. You're not stuck. You are becoming. I can take the next step. Not the whole staircase, just the next step. So take a breath with me before you go. Drop your shoulders. Let your jaw unclench. And thank you for spending this time with me, Nacho Knots. If you're in a hard season, be gentle with yourself this week. Keep it small. Keep it honest. Keep it kind. And I'll be right here with you the next time.
Thank you for joining us. See you next week. The views and opinions expressed in this video are solely those of the creator and do not reflect the views of any institution, employer, or affiliated organization.